She's just furniture at this point. I'm done pretending. Daniel Carter said those exact words laughing while holding Olivia's hand across a candlelit table 20 minutes from the home he shared with his wife. He had kissed Emily goodbye that morning, looked her in the eyes, said I love you without blinking, then spent the afternoon texting Olivia about their reservation. 8 years of marriage reduced to a joke between two people sharing his wife's favorite wine. Daniel thought he was untouchable. He thought tonight was perfect. He had no idea a waiter was already walking toward his table, carrying something that would destroy him completely. Subscribe now, drop your city in the comments, and watch what Emily Carter does next, because she didn't break. She rebuilt. Emily Carter was not a suspicious woman. That was the thing nobody would understand later when the whole story came out. People would assume she had been watching, waiting, building a case for months. They would imagine her as someone who had always sensed it, always known on some deep level that her husband was not what he pretended to be. But that was not how it happened. That was not who Emily was. She was the kind of woman who believed people when they spoke. She was the kind of wife who, when her husband said he was working late, pictured him actually working. She would make a plate, cover it with foil, leave it in the refrigerator with a little sticky note that said, "Didn't want you to go hungry." She was that woman. For 8 years she had been that woman. And Daniel Carter had counted on exactly that. It started on a Tuesday. Not a dramatic Tuesday. Not a Tuesday with thunder and lightning and some cosmic signal that her world was about to break apart. It was just a regular, unremarkable Tuesday in October, the kind where the light outside turns golden too early, and the air smells faintly like someone nearby is burning leaves. Emily was doing laundry. She had gathered Daniel's dry cleaning pile from the bedroom chair. He always left his jackets draped over that chair, and she always picked them up without comment, because that was one of those small accommodations you make in a long marriage, the kind you stop noticing after a while. She was checking the pockets before sending the blazer to the cleaners, because the dry cleaner had once laundered a set of car keys, and Daniel had been furious, and she had never wanted to hear about that again. Her fingers closed around a folded piece of paper. She almost didn't look. She almost just set it on the dresser and moved on. But something, some small, quiet voice she couldn't name, made her unfold it. It was a receipt from a restaurant called Chez Laurent, which she recognized immediately, because it was the kind of place you went for an anniversary or a birthday or a proposal. The kind of place that charged $40 for a single entree and kept the lights low and the music soft and the atmosphere precisely calibrated for romance. She looked at the date, October 3rd, a Wednesday. She stood there for a moment, her mind doing what minds do in those first seconds of something wrong. It tried to explain it away. It reached for any interpretation that would make this normal, harmless, explainable. Maybe it was a client dinner. Daniel took clients out sometimes. That was part of his job. Senior Vice President of Business Development that involved dinners, drinks, relationship building. She knew that. She accepted that. But the itemized list on the receipt told a different story. 2 glasses of champagne, 1 order of oysters, a shared chocolate soufflé for dessert with a note that said anniversary special printed right on the ticket. She set the receipt down on the dresser. She picked up the blazer. She checked the other pocket. There was another receipt. Different restaurant, different date. October 10th, also a Wednesday, also expensive. Also 2 glasses of wine, a single entree ordered twice, and a dessert. Emily sat down on the edge of the bed. She did not cry. Not yet. She just sat there with both receipts on her lap, looking at them the way you look at something your brain is refusing to fully process, like your eyes are working, but the signal isn't quite arriving. She thought about October 3rd. She thought about what Daniel had told her that night. She could remember clearly because she had asked him. She had called him at 7 o'clock to say dinner was ready, and he had said, "I'm in a meeting, Emily. This is a big account. I won't be home until late. Please don't wait up." She had eaten alone. She had watched television. She had left his plate in the refrigerator with a sticky note that said, "Hope the meeting went well." She had believed him. She had believed him so completely that she had never even thought to question it. That night when Daniel came home, she was already in bed. He had kissed her cheek. She remembered this now, with a sharpness that felt physical. He had kissed her cheek and said, "It was a long one. You okay?" And she had said, "I'm fine, just tired." And he had said, "Good, Get some rest. And that had been the whole exchange between two people who were supposed to know each other better than anyone else in the world. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. Then she got up, went to his closet, and started going through every jacket, every coat, every blazer he owned. By the time she was done, she had 7 receipts. 7, spread over 9 weeks, all from restaurants she had never been to, all with the same patterned champagne or wine dinner for 2, and always a shared dessert. Because whoever this woman was, she liked dessert, or he liked ordering it for her. Or maybe it had become a ritual between them, a small romantic habit, the kind of intimate shorthand that develops in a relationship where two people are genuinely enjoying each other. The kind of shorthand Emily and Daniel had stopped having somewhere around year 4. She laid all 7 receipts out on the kitchen table in order by date, and she looked at them like they were evidence at a crime scene. Because that was exactly what they were. Her hands were steady. That surprised her. She had expected to fall apart. She had always imagined in the abstract, distant way you imagine things that happen to other people, that if she ever discovered infidelity, she would collapse. She had imagined screaming or sobbing or throwing things. She had imagined being undone. Instead, she felt cold, precise, like something inside her had clicked off the emotional circuits and switched on something harder and quieter. She took photos of all 7 receipts with her phone. Then she put them back exactly where she had found them. She didn't say anything to Daniel that night, or the next night, or the night after that. She watched him. She watched him the way you watch a performance when you already know the script. You see every choice, every pause, every carefully placed expression, and you understand that what you're witnessing is not spontaneous, but constructed. Daniel was a very good performer. She saw it clearly now with the receipts seared into her memory. She watched him pour 2 glasses of wine at dinner and hand one to her with a smile. And she thought, he did this with her too. She watched him check his phone under the table casually, as though he was only glancing at the time, and she thought, he's texting her right now. She watched him laugh at something she said, a genuine laugh, or something that looked like one, and she thought, I have no idea who this man is. That realization did not arrive with noise. It arrived like a light going out. One moment she was the woman who had been married to Daniel Carter for 8 years and knew him like her own heartbeat. The next moment, he was a stranger sitting across from her at their kitchen table, and everything she thought she knew was a story she had told herself. She started sleeping differently, lighter, attuned to his movements in a way she had never needed to be before. She noticed that he charged his phone in the bathroom now. She noticed that he had changed his phone's passcode sometime in the last few weeks, because when she idly picked it up to check the weather, something she had done 100 times over the years, it didn't open with their anniversary date the way it always had. She noticed that he was showering immediately when he came home on late nights, before he even sat down, before he even said hello. She filed each observation away, quietly, carefully. And then on a Sunday afternoon, while Daniel was at his golf game, she sat down at the laptop they shared for household bills and utilities. The browser history had been cleared, recently, but Daniel had not thought about the autofill saved in the travel sites. He had not thought about the hotel loyalty program account he'd set up 3 years ago and still used his personal email to log in. He had not thought about the fact that Emily knew his email password not because she snooped, but because he had asked her to check a booking confirmation for him 2 years ago and had simply read it out to her, and she had simply remembered it the way you remember something you were never meant to forget. She opened his email account. For one long, strange moment, she sat with her hand on the mouse without clicking, because she knew that once she went in, there was no version of the next hour in which her life looked the same as it had this morning. She clicked. The inbox was careful. Daniel was not careless, not entirely. He had deleted most things. But the deleted folder retains its contents for 30 days, unless you manually purge it, and Daniel had not purged it. Emily spent 45 minutes in that folder. She read 14 hotel confirmation emails, all from the same mid-city boutique hotel, the Harlow, all on nights Daniel had told her he was working late or had an early morning conference the next day. She saw a rewards points summary email from October that referenced his recent stays and tallied them up. 12 nights at the Harlow in 4 months. 12 nights. She read the confirmation for a booking 2 weeks from now, a Friday night, a corner suite. Then she found the email thread. It had been forwarded from a separate email account. She didn't recognize a Gmail address that was just a string of numbers, no name, but the auto-forwarded confirmation had pulled the conversation chain with it. And there, in the thread below the booking details, were messages between Daniel and a woman. Her name was Olivia Miller. Emily did not know this name. She had gone through her mental catalog of every person Daniel had ever mentioned, every colleague, every contact, and Olivia Miller was not in it, which meant Daniel had never mentioned her, which was its own kind of answer. The messages were not primarily sexual, and somehow that was worse. They were tender, they were easy and laughing and intimate in that particular way that belongs only to people who have decided they genuinely care about each other. There were inside jokes Emily didn't understand. There were references to conversations and meals and small moments. There was a thread from 3 weeks ago where Olivia wrote, "I keep thinking about what you said on Saturday, about what your life could look like." And Daniel had written back, "It's going to look exactly the way we want it to. I promise you that." And then Olivia had written, "What about her?" And Daniel had written Emily, "And I have been over for a long time. She just doesn't know it yet. That marriage has been dead for years. I'm just figuring out the right moment." Emily read that sentence 3 times. She read it with the same calm, terrifying stillness that had been her companion since the first receipt. She read it, and she felt something move through her. Not grief exactly, or not only grief, but something harder and sharper beneath the grief. Something that sounded very quietly, like the word no. She just doesn't know it yet. He had decided. He had decided without telling her, without a conversation, without the basic dignity of an honest word. He had decided that their marriage was over, and he had built an entire parallel life on that decision. A hotel room, a woman who was already using the word we, and he had continued to come home to her to eat her food and sleep in her bed and kiss her cheek at night while privately treating her as an inconvenience he hadn't yet dealt with. She closed the laptop. She sat at the kitchen table in the quiet of their house, and she listened to the stillness. The refrigerator hum, a car passing outside, the small sounds of a life she had built in the belief that it was mutual. She picked up her phone. She dialed a number. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, professional, warm, unhurried. "Patricia Morgan's office." "Yes," Emily said, and her voice was steady, and she surprised herself. "My name is Emily Carter. I'd like to schedule a consultation. It's about a divorce." She set up the appointment for Thursday. She did not cancel it. She did not waver. Wednesday evening, Daniel came home from work at the usual time just after 7, and Emily had made dinner as she always did, and they ate together, and she asked about his day, and he told her about a contract negotiation that was going well, and she nodded and listened and said, "That's great, Daniel, at the right moments." And inside, she felt like she was watching this from somewhere very far away. After dinner, he poured himself a glass of scotch and settled into the sofa with his phone, and she cleared the dishes, and at one point she heard him laugh softly at something on the screen. "What's funny?" she asked from the kitchen, her voice completely neutral. "Just a thing from work," he said. "Nothing important." She said. She washed the dishes by hand, which she didn't usually do, because she needed something to do with her hands. She stood at the sink and scrubbed a pan they'd owned since their wedding, and she thought about Patricia Morgan's office and the appointment on Thursday and the folder on her phone containing photographs of 7 restaurant receipts, and she made herself breathe slowly in and out the way her yoga instructor had once told her to breathe when she felt overwhelmed. The difference was that she wasn't overwhelmed. She was absolutely, completely, terrifyingly calm. That she understood was what happened when you crossed from grief into purpose. She dried the pan. She put it away. She said goodnight to her husband, who was still laughing at something on his phone, and she went upstairs, and she lay in bed in the dark, and she began to plan. Thursday came. Patricia Morgan's office was on the 14th floor of a downtown building, all clean lines and pale wood, with a receptionist who offered coffee and spoke in a tone that managed to be both efficient and kind. Patricia herself was in her late 50s, silver-haired, unhurried, with the particular quality of someone who has heard every version of this story and still gives each one her full attention. "Tell me what brought you here," Patricia said. Emily opened her phone and set it on the desk, displaying the first photograph. 7 restaurant receipts, she said. 14 hotel confirmation emails. A private email thread between my husband and a woman named Olivia Miller. and a message in his own words where he states that our marriage has been dead for years and his wife, me, just doesn't know it yet. Patricia looked at her steadily. "How long have you known?" 12 days, Emily said. "And does he know you know?" "No," Emily said, "and I intend to keep it that way for now." Patricia nodded slowly. Something shifted in her expression, the particular respect that passes between one careful woman and another. "All right," Patricia said. She opened a legal pad. "Then let's talk about what you want." Emily didn't hesitate. "Everything he owes me," she said, "and my life back." She thought about the woman named Olivia. She turned the name over in her mind, the way you turn over a stone carefully because you don't know what's underneath. Olivia. Not a name Daniel had ever mentioned. Not a colleague she'd heard about at company dinners. Not a name that had ever come up in 8 years of shared conversation. Whoever this woman was, Daniel had kept her completely separate, parallel, like a second life running alongside the first invisible synchronized. That was what struck Emily hardest sitting in the quiet of that study, not just the betrayal, the architecture of it, the deliberate construction of a hidden world maintained daily while she stood 3 feet away in the same house making coffee and asking how his day was. She had been asking how his day was, and he had been answering, calmly, consistently, for 11 months. For 11 men. Emily walked back to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water and stood at the sink and drank it slowly. Then she picked up her phone and typed Olivia's email address into Google. Nothing obvious came up. She tried variations. She searched the domain of Daniel's company, thinking maybe this woman worked with him. She searched his LinkedIn connections. She scrolled through the list of people who had liked his posts, his comments, his professional announcements. Then she found her. Olivia Miller, 29 years old, junior associate at a consulting firm that had done contract work with Daniel's company 18 months ago. Her LinkedIn photo showed a woman with dark hair and a careful smile, the kind of photo that is professional, but also quietly aware of being looked at. She had 212 connections. She had posted a photo at a rooftop bar 3 weeks ago with the caption, "Late Nights and City Lights." The bar in the background was Cielo Rooftop. November 8th. Emily set her phone face down on the counter and stood very still. She was 41 years old. She had a master's degree in communications from NYU. She had a career she had built from nothing, a home she had decorated with her own hands, a marriage she had invested in the way you invest in something you believe will hold its value. She was not going to fall apart in her own kitchen. She picked the phone back up and went back to Daniel's email. This time she wasn't skimming. She was reading with the focused attention of someone building a case, which is exactly what she was doing even if she hadn't named it yet. She started from the beginning of the thread 11 months ago, late January, and read forward. The first few emails were careful, almost professional. Daniel and Olivia had met at a project meeting, and the early messages were about work, about handoffs and deliverables, with small jokes tucked inside professional language. Emily could see the moment it shifted, February 4th, a Thursday, when Olivia had sent a message that ended with, "And for what it's worth, I think you're the most interesting person in that room." Daniel's response had come within 6 minutes. "I've been thinking the same thing about you." 6 minutes. He hadn't paused, hadn't reconsidered, hadn't thought about the woman at home who was probably making dinner right about then. Emily checked the timestamp. 6:47 p.m. She had made pasta that night. She remembered because she had called Daniel to ask if he wanted garlic bread, and he had said yes. He had been emailing Olivia from the parking garage. She kept reading. By March, they were meeting for lunch. By April, they had moved to dinner. By May, the language had shifted completely warmer, more desperate the way language gets when two people are no longer pretending to themselves about what's happening. One email from May stopped her completely. Daniel had written, "I know this isn't simple. I know there are real consequences, but I haven't felt like this in years, maybe ever, and I'm not willing to walk away from it just because it's complicated." She read that twice, maybe ever. Emily Carter, his wife of 8 years, had never made him feel like this. That was what he was saying. That was what he believed. She sat with that sentence and let it land fully because she was not the kind of woman who looked away from things that hurt. Then she kept reading. By June, they had developed routines: Tuesday dinners, Thursday evenings, occasional weekend afternoons when Daniel told Emily he was playing golf. She checked. He had told her he was golfing 11 times since January. 11 Saturday mornings, she had stayed home or run errands or met her friend Rachel for brunch while Daniel was somewhere else entirely. She had never questioned the golf. He'd always played golf. She wondered how many of those 11 times were actually golf. She pulled up her own calendar on her phone and went back through the Saturdays. She cross-referenced them with Daniel's emails. 8 of the 11 Saturdays, Daniel had mentioned Olivia in an email sent within 2 hours of when he told Emily he was heading to the course. 8. Emily closed both apps. She set the phone on the desk and pressed her palms flat against the surface and breathed. Here was the thing about Emily Carter that most people, including apparently her husband, did not fully understand. She was not a woman who processed things loudly. She didn't slam doors or throw dishes or make speeches. The emotional storm happened inside, compressed and intense, and what came out the other side was not grief. It was decision. She was starting to feel the decision forming now at the edges of everything the way ice forms at the edges of a pond before it takes the center. Cold, quiet, certain. She went to the filing cabinet in the study and found a fresh folder. She labeled it with a single letter, E, for Emily, for evidence. She printed the emails, 12 pages of them, the most significant ones, the ones with dates and admissions and plans. She added them to the folder with the 3 restaurant receipts. She took the folder upstairs and put it in her own closet behind a row of shoeboxes, somewhere Daniel would have no reason to look. Then she came back downstairs and started making dinner. Daniel came home at 7:15. He put his keys on the hook by the door, dropped his bag by the stairs, and walked into the kitchen with the ease of a man who has no idea that the ground has shifted completely beneath his feet. "Smells good," he said. "What is it, chicken marsala?" Emily said without turning around. "Perfect." He opened the refrigerator. "Long day. Henderson's team keeps moving the goalposts." "That's frustrating," she said. He poured himself a glass of water and leaned against the counter and told her about the Henderson account for 7 minutes. She listened. She asked a follow-up question. She handed him the wooden spoon to taste the sauce. He tasted it and nodded and said she always got the balance right. She smiled. "Set the table." He did. They ate dinner. They talked about a show they were watching. They talked about whether to book a trip to Napa in the spring. Daniel said he'd been thinking about it, that they deserved a real vacation, that they hadn't gone anywhere nice in too long. Emily said that sounded wonderful. After dinner, Daniel fell asleep on the couch watching the news. Emily sat beside him close enough to touch him and looked at his face completely relaxed, completely unguarded, and felt something she couldn't name settle permanently inside her. Whatever she had loved about this man was still visible in his face when he slept. That was the cruelest part. He didn't look like a liar when he slept. He looked like the man she had married, but she knew what he was now. She let him sleep. She went upstairs, got into bed, and started doing something she had never done before. She started a list on her phone, not of grievances, not of memories, but of assets, joint accounts, her car still in both their names, the mortgage which they carried together, her 401k which she had contributed to faithfully for 12 years before they married and 6 years after. Daniel's income, which she knew precisely because she had always handled the household finances. Another thing he had left entirely to her. She knew what everything was worth. She knew what was hers. She typed the name Patricia Morgan into her phone's notes app. Patricia Morgan was a divorce attorney. Emily had never needed a divorce attorney. But she had a colleague, Janine, from her old marketing job, whose divorce had been swift and clean and decisive. Emily had once asked Janine quietly over lunch how she'd managed it. Janine had slid a business card across the table and said, "This woman, she's the best. I hope you never need her." Emily had kept the card in her wallet for 3 years without knowing why. Now she knew why. She didn't call Patricia Morgan that night. She called her the next morning at 8:15 from her car in the driveway before Daniel was awake. The receptionist answered. Emily asked for an appointment. The receptionist said the earliest available was in 10 days. Emily said that would be fine. She gave her name and confirmed her number and ended the call. Then she went back inside and made coffee. She made 2 cups, black for Daniel, oat milk for herself. She set his on the counter. She sat at the kitchen table with hers and read the news on her phone the same as every morning. And when Daniel came downstairs in his robe and said, "Morning," she said morning back and asked if he'd slept okay. He said he always slept well when she made chicken marsala. She smiled and turned a page. For the next 10 days, Emily Carter was the most composed woman in New York City. She went to work, she met with clients, she came home and cooked dinner and asked about Daniel's day and listened and responded. She did it so naturally, so consistently, that she almost frightened herself. But underneath that surface, she was building, she was gathering. She was not reactive. She was strategic, and the strategy was sharpening every day. She found the hotel bookings on a Thursday afternoon. She had been looking through the joint credit card statement, something she did monthly, usually without incident, when she saw a charge she didn't recognize. The Four Seasons, $280, a Tuesday night in September. She hadn't gone anywhere in September, and Daniel had told her that Tuesday he was at a work dinner that ran too late to drive home if he'd been upstate, which he said he had been. He hadn't been upstate. He'd been at the Four Seasons. She went through 12 months of credit card statements in 2 hours. She found 6 hotel charges, all on nights Daniel had given her specific, detailed explanations, all at hotels within the city or within a 2-hour drive, all between $150 and $320. She photographed every statement. She added them to the folder. Then she found something that changed the nature of the case entirely. Going through the credit card statements, she had noticed that 3 of the restaurant dinners, Maison 44, Bellini's Cielo Rooftop, had been paid in cash, not on the card, which meant Daniel had been deliberately avoiding a paper trail on specific nights. He was careful. He had a system. He had thought this through, but the hotel bookings were on the card, and not just the joint card. When she looked more closely at the October statement, she found a second line. A credit card she hadn't recognized, one she had assumed was a company card. She Googled the issuer. It was a personal card. Daniel had a personal credit card she knew nothing about. She called the number on the back of the statement. She was listed as an authorized user. Daniel had apparently added her at some point, perhaps by accident, which was why it appeared on their joint paperwork. The representative confirmed the account, confirmed her authorization, and when Emily asked about additional statements, the representative offered to email them. Emily gave her work email address. The statements arrived the next morning. 3 months of a second card. 43 charges that had nothing to do with their shared life. More hotels, jewelry, a bracelet from a boutique in Soho, $380. Spa treatments, a weekend reservation at a country inn in Connecticut, charged under the name D. Carter Occupancy for 2. The weekend of the country inn, Daniel had told Emily he was at a sales conference in Philadelphia. She had packed his bag, she had folded his shirts, she had driven him to the car service because he said he needed to be at the airport by 6. There was no conference in Philadelphia. She checked. She searched his company's event calendar, which was publicly visible on their website. There was nothing in Philadelphia that weekend. There had been no conference. She had folded his shirts. Emily sat at her desk at work and stared at her screen and understood for the first time the full scale of what Daniel had been doing. This was not a moment of weakness. This was not a collision impulsive regretted a mistake that had grown too large to contain. This was a construction. Deliberate, sustained, a second life built brick by brick over nearly a year while she stood in their shared life, believing she was living in something real. She thought about what he had written in May. "I haven't felt like this in years. Maybe ever." She thought, "You built this carefully, Daniel. You did this on purpose. You were not careless. You chose this every day for 11 months, and you came home and looked me in the face." She wasn't crying. She was done crying, at least for now. She was something harder than that. She picked up her phone and texted Rachel. Just 3 words. "Can we talk?" Rachel called back in 4 minutes. That was Rachel she always called back. "What's wrong?" Rachel said immediately. "I can hear it." "Nothing's wrong," Emily said. "Then everything is wrong. Can you meet me after work?" "I'll be there at 6, Rachel said. "Don't say another word until then. Save it." Emily said, "Okay." She hung up and went back to work and did not think about Daniel Carter for the rest of the afternoon, which was the first time in weeks she had managed that, and it felt almost like relief. almost like something turning over, almost like the beginning of something she didn't have a name for yet. At 5:58, Rachel walked into the wine bar on 7th, where Emily was already waiting, already holding a glass of something red that she hadn't touched yet. Rachel took one look at her face and sat down and said, "How long, ma'am?" 11 months that I know of, Emily said. Rachel sat back. "Oh, Emily." "I have everything," Emily said. "Receipts, emails, hotel records, a credit card I didn't know about. I have all of it." Rachel stared at her. "How long have you been collecting this?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Rachel's voice was just above a whisper. "You've known for 3 weeks and you haven't said anything to him." "No." "How?" Rachel said. "How have you been sitting across from him every night?" "I needed to know the full picture," Emily said. "I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I made any decisions. If I had confronted him 3 weeks ago, he would have minimized it, denied it, destroyed evidence, given me some version of it that he controlled." She took a sip of her wine finally. "I don't want his version. I want the truth. I have the truth." Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What are you going to do?" Emily looked at her. Her oldest friend, the woman who had been in her wedding, who had held her hand at her father's funeral, who had known her since they were 22 years old and sharing a terrible apartment in Astoria. "I have an appointment with Patricia Morgan," Emily said. Rachel said, "The divorce attorney." "The best in New York," Emily said, and she picked up her glass. And for the first time in 3 weeks, sitting across from someone who loved her without condition, she felt something that was not grief and was not anger and was not the cold precision of strategy. She felt free, not completely, not yet. There was still so much ahead, the confrontation, the documents, the unraveling of a life she had built piece by piece. There was still the moment she would have to look Daniel Carter in the face and show him what she knew. There was still the shape of everything that came after. But right now, in this moment, with Rachel sitting across from her and the city moving outside the window and a good glass of wine in her hand, Emily Carter understood something that Daniel Carter had not considered when he was laughing with Olivia across a candlelit table and calling his marriage maintenance. She was not broken. She was not going to break. She was going to walk through every hard thing that was coming, calmly, strategically, completely. And she was going to come out the other side of it entirely herself. And Daniel Carter was going to understand eventually exactly what he had thrown away. But not yet. Right now, Emily was just going to sit here with her best friend and her wine and let herself feel for the first time in 3 very long weeks the particular and specific relief of someone who finally knows the truth. Patricia Morgan's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Lexington Avenue, and it looked exactly like what it was, the office of a woman who had spent 20 years winning. Clean lines, no clutter, a single framed quote on the wall behind her desk that Emily didn't read until she was leaving. "Clarity is the most powerful tool a woman can carry." Emily had walked in with the folder, the E folder. She set it on Patricia Morgan's desk without saying anything, and Patricia, silver-haired, precise, with the kind of stillness that only comes from having heard everything, opened it and read. She read for 11 minutes without speaking. Emily counted. When Patricia looked up, she said, "This is thorough." "I had time," Emily said. Patricia almost smiled. "Most women come to me with suspicions, feelings, screenshots they're not sure about." She tapped the folder. "You came with a case." "I want to know what I'm entitled to," Emily said. "Everything in a joint marital estate is divisible," Patricia said. "The house, the accounts, his pension, any assets acquired during the marriage. With documented infidelity in a fault state, the picture becomes considerably more favorable to you." She paused. "Do you want to move forward?" Emily said. "I want to move forward the right way. Not fast. Right." Patricia nodded slowly. "Then here's what I'm going to tell you. Don't confront him yet. Don't change your behavior. Don't move money. Don't remove property. Don't tip your hand in any direction. Let me file the preliminary paperwork quietly. When you're ready and you decide when we serve him." Emily said, "I want him to know that I know. I want him to understand the full extent of what he's done. I don't want to hand him papers in the kitchen over coffee." She paused. "I want it to mean something." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. "What did you have in mind?" Emily told her. By the time she finished, Patricia Morgan was quiet for a beat, and then she said something Emily would remember for a long time. In 20 years of practice, I have never had a client come to me with a plan like that. She picked up her pen. Let's make sure it's legally airtight. That meeting was on a Thursday. What followed were 3 weeks that Emily would later describe to Rachel as the strangest of her life, not because they were dramatic, but because they were so completely ordinary on the surface and so precisely calculated underneath. She went home. She made dinner. She sat across from Daniel at the table they had bought in Brooklyn, and she asked about Henderson, and she listened to the answer, and she passed the salt when he reached for it. She had become without meaning to the best actress she had ever known. The only person who knew the full picture was Rachel. Rachel, who texted every morning with a single emoji, a small red heart, just so Emily would know that someone in the world was thinking of her. Emily always wrote back. Sometimes it was just a heart in return. Sometimes on the harder mornings it was still standing. Rachel always responded, "I know you are." Daniel, meanwhile, had no idea that the ground beneath his feet had already given way. He continued his Tuesdays and Thursdays. He continued his weekend golf stories. He came home on a Friday night in early December with a bottle of good wine and said he'd had a great week and wanted to celebrate. And Emily poured 2 glasses and clinked hers against his and said, "To good weeks." He beamed at her. He actually beamed. She drank her wine and didn't feel a thing, which was how she knew she was ready. She called Patricia the next morning. "I want to set the date." Patricia said, "Tell me when." Emily said, "December 19th, Thursday. He always takes her out on Thursdays." "And the location?" "I'll handle the location," Emily said. "I just need the papers ready." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "Emily, are you sure about the public element? We can serve him at the office at home, anywhere you choose. It doesn't have to be—" "I want him to feel it," Emily said quietly. Not with anger, just with certainty. He took her to restaurants for 11 months. He sat at those tables and laughed and ordered wine and made her feel like she was the only person in the world while I was home believing he was working late. I want him to be sitting at a table when his world ends. I want him to know exactly how it feels to have everything collapse around a dinner plate. Patricia said nothing for a moment. Then, "The papers will be ready by December 17th. The restaurant was called Aldea. It was one of Daniel's favorites, not Maison 44, not Bellini's, somewhere he went when he wanted to feel important. Emily had known about Aldea for years. She had eaten there with him twice early in their marriage, when things were still uncomplicated. She knew the manager, a man named Thomas Ellard, because Daniel had introduced them at a charity event 3 years ago, and Thomas had been gracious and remembered her name. She called Thomas on a Monday. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "what can I do for you?" She told him what she needed. She was prepared for resistance. She was prepared to be told it was impossible, that the restaurant couldn't be involved in personal matters, that he was sorry but no. Thomas Ellard was quiet for a very long moment. Then he said, "My mother went through something similar 30 years ago." Another pause. "What time is the reservation?" 7:30, Emily said. "I'll make sure Marco handles the table," Thomas said. "He's discreet. And Mrs. Carter, I'm sorry, for what it's worth." "It's worth a great deal," Emily said. "Thank you, Thomas." She had known for a week through a quiet conversation with Patricia that Daniel had a reservation at Aldea on December 19th. How Patricia had confirmed it, Emily didn't ask. Some things you accept on trust when the person you're trusting has 20 years of winning behind her. December 19th was a Thursday. In the days leading up to it, Emily made arrangements that had nothing to do with Daniel and everything to do with herself. She signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn Heights, a clean, bright space she had found on a Sunday afternoon while Daniel was allegedly at the driving range. She arranged for a moving company to come on December 20th, the morning after. She moved her personal documents, passport, social security card, the E-folder to Rachel's apartment for safekeeping. She packed a bag. Not everything, just enough. 2 weeks of clothes, her laptop, her grandmother's pearl earrings, the photo from her parents' anniversary that she kept on her nightstand. She drove the bag to Rachel's on a Wednesday evening, telling Daniel she was having dinner with an old friend from college. "Have fun," Daniel said, not looking up from his phone. She looked at him for a moment. "I will," she said. She drove to Rachel's. Rachel met her at the door and took the bag without a word and put it in the guest room. Then she opened a bottle of wine and poured 2 glasses and said, "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Emily said. They sat for a while without talking much. Rachel put on something low in the background, just noise to fill the quiet. At one point, Rachel said, "Are you scared?" Emily thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "I thought I would be, but I'm not." "What do you feel?" Emily held her wine glass with both hands and looked at it. "Ready?" she said. "I just feel ready." Rachel reached across and squeezed her hand once hard and then let go. Emily drove home at 10. Daniel was asleep on the couch. She turned off the television the same way she had done 1,000 times and went upstairs and slept better than she had in months. December 19th, 7 a.m. Daniel was in a good mood at breakfast, unusually good. He made eggs something he rarely did and poured orange juice and stood at the counter, eating with the relaxed ease of a man anticipating a good day. Emily watched him from across the kitchen and marveled quietly at the completeness of his self-assurance. He had no idea, not a flicker. "Big Thursday," she asked. "Henderson finally signed," he said. "We're closing the quarter strong. Feels good." "That's great," she said. "Dinner to celebrate." He glanced at her. Just a flicker, almost nothing, and then probably grab something with the guys from the office. "Don't wait up." "I won't," Emily said. She said it with warmth. She smiled at him across the kitchen, and he smiled back, and it was the last moment of normalcy between them, though he didn't know it. She did. He left at 8:15. She stood at the window and watched his car pull out of the driveway and disappear around the corner, and then she exhaled long, slow, complete, and went upstairs and called Patricia. "Today's the day," she said. "The envelope will be at Aldea by 6, Patricia said. "I'm sending my associate James to deliver it personally and brief Thomas's contact on timing. The papers are complete, fully documented, signed by me, with the evidence packet attached exactly as we discussed." A pause. "Emily, whatever happens tonight, you've done everything right." "I know," Emily said. "Thank you, Patricia." "Thank it." She spent the day doing ordinary things. She went to the grocery store. She responded to work emails. She had a call with a client that went well. She ate lunch alone at the kitchen table, a sandwich, a cup of tea, and sat with the stillness of someone who has already made their decision and is simply waiting for the clock to catch up. At 4 p.m., Rachel texted, "You okay?" Emily wrote back, "More than okay." At 6 p.m., Emily got into her car and drove to a coffee shop 4 blocks from Aldea. She ordered a latte she didn't want and sat at a table by the window and waited. She was not going to be inside the restaurant. That was never the plan. Her presence wasn't the point. The papers were the point. The moment was the point. Her phone buzzed at 7:42. It was a text from Thomas Ellard. 3 words, "It's been done." Emily set her phone down on the table. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She sat very still and breathed. Inside Aldea at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday in December, a waiter named Marco had approached table 9, a corner table well lit, one of the better ones, where Daniel Carter sat across from a young woman with dark hair and a careful smile. They were midway through their entrees. A bottle of Barolo nearly finished. Daniel's jacket hung on the back of his chair. He was laughing at something Olivia had just said. Marco set a sealed ivory envelope on the table beside Daniel's plate. "Sir, Marco said quietly and professionally. "This was left for you at the front." Daniel looked at the envelope. He looked at Marco. Something shifted in his face. Not alarm, not yet, just a brief uncertainty. He picked up the envelope. His name was written on the front in clean black ink. Daniel Carter. He turned it over. The return address was Patricia Morgan Law, LLC. Olivia said, "What is it?" Daniel said, "I don't know." But his voice had changed. Just slightly. The ease had gone out of it. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single cover sheet on legal letterhead, and behind it, a substantial packet of documents, the divorce petition, the financial disclosures, and the evidence. The receipts, the email printouts, the hotel records, the credit card statements, every piece of it organized, precisely numbered, dated. The cover sheet read in clean professional language, "Notice of divorce proceedings. Petitioner Emily Walsh Carter. Respondent Daniel James Carter. And below that, in a single additional line that Patricia had added at Emily's specific request, evidence of infidelity attached, 11 months, full documentation enclosed. Daniel stopped moving. He sat completely still with the papers in his hands, and the restaurant noise continued around him. Silverware conversation, the low sound of the music, and for a moment he just didn't move. Olivia said, "Daniel, what is it? You're scaring me." He looked up at her, and something happened in his face in that moment that several nearby diners would later describe differently. Some said he went pale. Some said he looked like a man who had been struck. One woman at the adjacent table would tell her friend the next day that she had never seen an expression like it, a face that was trying to find a version of events that made the thing in his hands not real. He stopped. He looked back down at the papers. "It's divorce papers." Olivia stared at him. "What? From Emily?" His voice was barely above a speaking volume now. She knows." Olivia said, "What do you mean she knows? How does she—" And then she saw his face, the full collapse of it, and she stopped. And then she reached across the table and took the cover sheet from his unresisting hand and read it. Her eyes moved down the page. She turned to the evidence packet. She saw her name in Daniel's emails. She saw the dates. She saw the hotels. She put the papers down very carefully. She picked up her clutch. She looked at Daniel Carter across the table, this man who had told her his marriage was already over, that Emily was cold, distant, that they had been nothing to each other for years, that it was only a matter of time, and she said very quietly, "You told me she didn't care. You told me it was basically done." "Olivia, you told me she wouldn't even notice." Her voice was still quiet, but there was something in it now, sharp and cold. 11 months. She has 11 months of documentation, Daniel. That is not a woman who doesn't notice. That is a woman who was watching you the entire time. Let me explain. No. She stood up. She picked up her coat from the back of her chair. No, don't. She looked at him one more time, and whatever she saw in his face gave her no reason to stay. Don't call me. She walked out of Aldea with her head up and her coat over her arm, and the entire restaurant watched her go because by now the nearest tables had caught the shape of what was happening, the way you can feel a shift in the air before you understand the source of it. Daniel sat at table 9 with the divorce papers in front of him and an unfinished bottle of Barolo and 2 plates of food going cold, and a room full of people who were very carefully not looking at him, except for the ones who were. He picked up his phone. He called Emily. She was 4 blocks away, sitting at a coffee shop table when her phone lit up with his name. She looked at it for 2 full rings. Then she declined the call. He called again. She declined again. He called a 3rd time, and this time she turned her phone over so the screen faced down and finished the last of her latte, which had gone lukewarm and which she drank anyway, slowly to the last drop. She sat there for a while longer. She wasn't in a hurry. There was nowhere she needed to be tonight, except here in this chair, in this ordinary coffee shop on the other side of the thing she had built and executed and seen through to the end. Her phone buzzed with a text. Daniel, Emily, please, can we talk? Please call me back. Then another, I don't understand how you... Then another, please. She read them. She set the phone back down. She looked out the window at the street at the ordinary December night, at the people walking past, bundled in coats, living their ordinary lives, going wherever they were going. She thought about the word he had used, maintenance. She thought you built something for 11 months, Daniel. So did I. The difference is that mine is already done and yours just collapsed in a restaurant on a Thursday night. She left a tip on the table, a generous one, because the barista had been kind, and she put on her coat and she walked out into the cold and she called Rachel. Rachel picked up on the first ring. It's done, Emily said. Rachel exhaled a sound that was almost a laugh and almost a cry. Are you okay? Yes, Emily said. She was walking now, moving through the cold air, and she could feel something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not relief. Exactly. Not happiness. Not the absence of pain. Something cleaner than all of that. Something that felt like the first full breath after a long time of breathing shallow. I'm more than okay, Rachel. Where are you? Walking. Emily said. "I just feel like walking for a while." Rachel said, "Okay, I'll be here when you're done." Emily walked. The city moved around her, indifferent and alive, and she walked through it without direction for almost an hour in the cold December air, with her hands in her pockets, and her face lifted slightly, the way you lift your face when you finally stop bracing for impact. Her phone kept lighting up in her pocket. She didn't check it. There was nothing in it that required her attention tonight. She was done with that phone, done with those calls, done with the version of her life that had required her to be careful and quiet and strategic and invisible. She had been all of those things because she needed to be. She wasn't going to need to be anymore. She would get back to Rachel's apartment tonight, where her bag was already waiting. She would sleep in the guest room in clean sheets. She would get up in the morning when she wanted to. She would have coffee exactly the way she liked it, oat milk 1 sugar without making a second cup for anyone else. And tomorrow evening, the moving company would arrive at the house on the other side of the city and begin carrying out the things that belonged to Emily Walsh Carter, who was no longer the woman in that house, who had not been that woman for quite some time, and who was finally, permanently, completely free. Daniel Carter drove home from Aldea in 23 minutes. He knew because he checked the clock when he pulled out of the parking garage 9:14, and he checked it again when he turned onto their street 9:37. He had spent those 23 minutes calling Emily 7 times, texting her 4 times, and rehearsing versions of a conversation that became less coherent with every red light. He had a speech prepared by the time he pulled into the driveway. Something about context, about how things had gotten complicated, how he hadn't meant for it to go this far, how if she would just let him explain the full picture, she would understand that this wasn't what it looked like, that he loved her, that Olivia was— he hadn't finished that sentence in his head yet, but he would by the time he got to the door. He got to the door. He put his key in the lock and pushed it open and said, "Emily." Silence. Not the silence of a house where someone is in another room. The silence of a house where no one is home. He felt it before he processed it, something about the quality of the air, the particular stillness that a space takes on when it has been vacated. He turned on the kitchen light. The counters were clean. The dish rack was empty. The coffee maker was unplugged, which Emily never did. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the room and felt the first real tremor of something he wasn't ready to name. He went upstairs. Her closet door was open. He stood in front of it for a long moment. Half her clothes were gone, not all of them enough to be deliberate, not so many as to be chaotic. The things she would need, the things that mattered, the good coat, the gray cashmere sweater he had given her for Christmas 2 years ago, her grandmother's jewelry box. He could see the empty square on the shelf where it had always sat. The nightstand on her side of the bed was clear. No book, no reading glasses, no glass of water she always kept there and almost never drank. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his face in his hands. His phone buzzed. He grabbed it. "Emily." He answered before the second buzz. "Emily, thank God. Listen, just let me—" "This is Patricia Morgan," said a calm, professional voice. "I'm calling on behalf of my client, Emily Carter, to confirm that she has received your attempts at contact and will not be responding personally. All further communication should be directed through this office. I'll be emailing you contact information for our process server and the preliminary hearing schedule within the hour." "Wait, no, I need to talk to her. I just need 5 minutes." "Mr. Carter," Patricia said with a patience that was somehow more withering than anger, "my client does not wish to speak with you. That is her right and it will be respected. You'll receive everything you need through proper channels. I'd strongly suggest retaining counsel before Monday." A brief pause. "Have a good evening." The call ended. Daniel stared at his phone. Then he called Emily's number directly. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. Her voice on the recording, familiar, warm, completely ordinary, said to leave a message and she'd call back. He hung up without leaving one, called again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He texted, "Emily, please, I know I don't deserve this, but please just talk to me. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." He stared at the screen. The message showed delivered. No response. He sat on the edge of their bed in the house they had bought together, in the room where they had slept next to each other for 6 years, and he understood for the first time with his full body, rather than just his mind, that she was gone. Not temporarily, not in the way people leave during a fight and come back by morning. gone in the way that is preceded by 11 months of watching and 3 weeks of planning and a folder of evidence and a sealed envelope delivered to his table in a restaurant while he was laughing. She had known for 3 weeks. She had sat across from him at dinner. She had passed him the salt. She had asked about Henderson. She had smiled. He had thought she had no idea. The thought of it, the precise, complete reversal of every assumption he had made, hit him somewhere in the chest and stayed there. He went back downstairs. He poured himself 2 fingers of whiskey and sat at the kitchen table and stared at the wall and tried to think clearly, which he could not do. He called Olivia. It rang once and went to voicemail. He hung up and called again. Voicemail. He texted, "Olivia, I know tonight was a disaster. I need to explain. Please call me." No response. He sat at the table until midnight. Neither of them called back. December 20th, 7:15 a.m. Daniel had slept approximately 90 minutes in his clothes on the living room couch. He woke up to sunlight and the sound of a truck on their street and the immediate crushing return of everything he had briefly escaped in sleep. He checked his phone. 14 missed calls, all from him, none returned. A voicemail from his brother Kevin, which meant someone had already told Kevin, which meant it was moving. He didn't listen to the voicemail. He made coffee. He stood at the kitchen counter drinking it and trying to construct a sequence of rational next steps, which kept collapsing because every sequence required Emily to participate, and Emily was not participating. At 8 a.m., he heard the truck again closer. He went to the front window. It was a moving truck, mid-sized professional backed up to the driveway with the patient efficiency of people who do this for a living. 3 men got out. One of them knocked on the door. Daniel opened it. "Morning," the man said. He had a clipboard. "We're here for the Carter pickup. We have authorization for items on this list." He held out the clipboard. Daniel took it. It was a detailed inventory, furniture boxes, personal items, all in Emily's handwriting, itemized with the precision of a woman who had been planning this for weeks while he ate her cooking and told her about Henderson. "You can't," Daniel started. "Sir, we have authorization from the account holder and a letter from Patricia Morgan Law confirming the items are personal property. If you'd like to dispute any items, you'll need to contact your attorney." The man said it gently, the way people say things they have been prepared to say. "We'll be out of your way within 2 hours." Daniel stepped back. He stood in the hallway of his own house and watched 3 strangers carry Emily out of it, her desk from the spare room, the reading chair she had bought at an estate sale in Connecticut and reupholstered herself, boxes he recognized from their labels, Kitchen Emily Books photos, her grandmother's full china set that had lived in the cabinet in the dining room since they moved in. He didn't stop them. He couldn't articulate even to himself why he didn't stop them, except that somewhere underneath the shock and the whiskey-sour remnants of last night, he understood that he didn't have the right. He sat on the stairs and watched his house become a house with rooms in it instead of a home. At 9:53, the lead mover came to find him. "We're done with the list. Thank you for your cooperation." He said it without irony, which was somehow the most devastating part. Daniel sat on the stairs alone after they left. On the kitchen table, he found the note, a small white card, his name in Emily's handwriting on the front. He picked it up with both hands. Inside 3 words, "Check your schedule." He stared at it. He turned it over. Nothing on the back. He read the 3 words again, "Check your schedule." He didn't know what that meant. He went to his phone and opened his calendar. December 19th, Thursday. The only thing listed was Aldea 7:30, which he had entered himself weeks ago and marked private. He scrolled back further, back through November, October, September. Every Tuesday and Thursday he had blocked with vague entries, late meeting, client dinner, off-site call, the digital scaffolding of his double life, which had seemed invisible to him and was now viewed from outside himself so obvious it made him physically ill. Check your schedule. She had known. She had watched him build it entry by entry, excuse by excuse, and she had let him because she was already building something else. His phone rang. Kevin. He answered this time. "What happened?" Kevin said immediately. "Marie texted me this morning, said she heard from Sarah Chen that something happened last night at Aldea. What is going on, Daniel?" Sarah Chen. Of course. Sarah Chen had been at Aldea with her husband. Sarah Chen, who had known both Daniel and Emily for 7 years, who was in their contacts, who had apparently recognized him at table 9 and witnessed the whole thing. "It's complicated," Daniel said. "Is Emily okay? Where is she?" She left. She's staying somewhere else." Silence on Kevin's end. Then, "Daniel, what did you do?" He didn't answer that. There was no answer to that question that made him look like anything other than what he was. Kevin said quietly and without cruelty, "You need a lawyer. Call one today, not tomorrow." Another pause. "I'll call you later." He hung up. Daniel's work phone rang 40 minutes later, his assistant Gretchen calling on his direct line, which she only did when something needed immediate attention. "Daniel," she said carefully, "I don't know if you've checked your email this morning, but there's something you should be aware of." He opened his laptop. His work email had 47 unread messages since midnight. The first one, sent at 11:58 p.m. by a colleague named Brian Foster, was a forward with a subject line that said simply, "Heads up, saw this circulating." It was a screenshot from someone's Instagram story. The timestamp was 9 o'clock the previous evening. The photo was taken from an adjacent table at Aldea. It showed Daniel recognizably. Daniel, his face turned slightly down, the papers in his hands, the expression he had no control over in that moment. The caption read, "Just witnessed a whole marriage end in real time at dinner. The wife served him divorce papers at the restaurant where he was on a date with someone else. I can't stop shaking." The story had been shared over 1,200 times before the original poster made their account private. Screenshots had escaped. They were circulating in group chats on Reddit threads on Twitter. Someone had identified the restaurant. Someone had identified the approximate date. Nobody had identified Daniel by name yet, but he worked in a city where people talked, and Brian Foster had recognized him immediately. And Brian Foster was not the only person who would. Gretchen said, "Daniel, I think you should call Marcus before you come in today." Marcus Hale was his division head, his boss, the man who had promoted him twice and trusted him to carry the Henderson account. Daniel said, "I'll call him now." He called Marcus. Marcus picked up on the second ring with a formality that told Daniel immediately that Marcus had already seen the screenshot. "Daniel," Marcus said, "I'm going to be straightforward with you. I need you to work from home this week while we assess the situation." "Marcus, this is a personal matter. It has nothing to do with—" "The Henderson account is a $40 million relationship," Marcus said, not unkindly, but without softness either. "James Henderson is a traditional man with traditional values who has made that very clear to this company on multiple occasions. If this story attaches your name publicly before we can manage the narrative, the account is at risk. I'm protecting the company, Daniel. That's my job." A pause. "Take the week. Keep your head down. We'll talk Friday." Daniel sat in his kitchen with both phones on the table and the empty house around him, and the note in his wife's handwriting still in his hand. "Check your schedule." He called Olivia one more time. It rang twice, and then not voicemail, but the mechanical voice of a disconnected number. She had changed her number. In less than 12 hours, Olivia Miller had changed her phone number. He set the phone down. He thought about the email he had written in May. "I haven't felt like this in years, maybe ever." He had meant it when he wrote it. He had believed it completely. He had built 11 months of his life around it. And now Emily was gone. And Olivia had disconnected her phone, and Marcus had pulled him from his office, and the screenshot was circulating in places he couldn't reach, and he was sitting alone in a house that was missing a reading chair and a china set and a coffee maker that was always plugged in. He thought about maintenance, the word he had used. The way he had described his marriage to Olivia reduced it, dismissed. It made it smaller so that what he was doing felt justified. It didn't feel justified now. It didn't feel like anything except what it was. January arrived with the particular cruelty of New Year's, the forced brightness of it, the pressure to frame things as beginnings, when they were clearly the wreckage of endings. Daniel worked from home most of the month. Marcus had not yet pulled him from Henderson, but the warning was implicit in every call, every careful phrasing, every meeting, to which he was no longer automatically included. The divorce proceedings had begun in earnest. Patricia Morgan was as advertised exceptional at her work. The preliminary filings included the full evidence packet, which meant that Daniel's attorney, a man named Gerald Watts, whom Kevin had recommended, had now read 11 months of Daniel's emails, had reviewed the hotel records, had seen the credit card statements for the secret personal card. Gerald had called Daniel after reviewing everything and said in the flat, airless tone of a man who had practiced managing his reactions for decades, "The documentation is comprehensive. My strong advice is that we move toward a fair settlement rather than a contested proceeding. Fighting this will cost you more than money." "How much more?" Daniel asked. "Your reputation for one," Gerald said. "This evidence could become part of the public record in a contested divorce. Right now it's contained within legal privilege. The moment we go to court, it isn't." He paused. "She has everything, Daniel. She was very thorough." Daniel knew she was thorough. He had known that about Emily for 8 years. He had simply never considered that she might direct that thoroughness at him. He signed the preliminary settlement agreement in late January. The house would be sold, proceeds split per Patricia Morgan's calculation of marital assets. His pension divided, the joint account settled. Emily's personal contributions returned to her in full, with interest which Gerald had fought and lost on in under a week. The week the agreement was signed, he was formally reassigned from the Henderson account. Marcus had called it a restructuring. Daniel had sat in the office and nodded and said he understood because there was nothing else to say. Henderson had heard the story, some version of it, and had requested a different point of contact, and that was that. $40 million and 7 years of relationship ended because a waiter had carried an envelope to a table at Aldea on a Thursday night. He went home after the meeting and sat in the house emptier, now the rooms rearranged by absence, and thought about all of it. The Henderson account. The screenshots still circulating in corners of the internet he couldn't find. Olivia, whose disconnected number he had stopped calling sometime in early January. Emily, whose attorney fielded every attempt at communication with the same measured professional detachment. He had lost both of them. He had lost his office standing. He was living in a house that was being sold out from under him in a city that was smaller than it looked, trying to reassemble a self-image that had been built. He understood now almost entirely on the belief that he was too careful to get caught. He had not been careful. He had been arrogant. There was a difference, and Emily had shown it to him with 11 months of documentation and a sealed envelope at a restaurant table. One Thursday evening in February, he drove past Aldea. He didn't plan to. He was taking a different route home from a meeting in Midtown, stuck in traffic, and suddenly there it was. The canopy, the warmly lit windows, the valet stand out front. He sat in traffic and looked at it. He thought about Table 9. He thought about the way the envelope had looked sitting beside his plate, cream-colored professional, his name in black ink. He thought about the moment he opened it, and the world rearranged itself completely, and there was nothing he could say and nowhere he could go. He thought about Emily sitting 4 blocks away in a coffee shop declining his calls. He thought about what it must have taken, the 3 weeks of dinners and conversations and salt passing and smiling. The months before that of receipts and emails and credit card statements gathered quietly, methodically, while he sat across from her believing she suspected nothing. The attorney, the moving company, the apartment she had already signed a lease on before that night. She had built an entire exit while he sat inside it, and he had never seen it coming because he had never really been looking at her. That was the part that stayed with him longest in the weeks that followed. Not the humiliation of the restaurant, not the professional fallout, not even the loneliness of the house. The knowledge that Emily had been that thorough, had loved him enough once to build a whole life with him, and had been hurt enough to dismantle it with the same care, and he had been looking elsewhere the entire time. He had told Olivia his marriage was maintenance. He understood now what he had been maintaining. He understood what he had walked away from every Tuesday and Thursday for 11 months, while Emily made dinner and asked about Henderson and smiled at him across the kitchen. He had called it maintenance because it was quiet, because it was steady and consistent and did not thrill him the way new things thrill, because he had confused depth for flatness and reliability for absence. He pulled away from the curb in front of Aldea and drove home through February streets, and for the first time since December 19th, Daniel Carter did not try to call anyone. He did not draft a text. He did not open his email and search for a version of events that made him the victim of something. He drove home and sat in the empty house and stayed with the truth of what he had done without softening it, without context, without the story he'd been telling himself for 11 months about what he needed and what he deserved and what his marriage had become. He stayed with it for a long time. And across the city in a clean, bright apartment in Brooklyn Heights, Emily Carter was not thinking about him at all. Emily Carter woke up on the first morning of January in a bed that was entirely hers. Not half hers, not shared by default by history, by the accumulated weight of 8 years sleeping beside someone who had been mentally elsewhere for the better part of a year. Entirely, completely quietly hers. The pillow on the left side of the bed had not been slept on. The blanket was pulled exactly as far as she wanted it. The alarm was set for the time she chose not negotiated around someone else's schedule. She lay there for a moment before getting up, just feeling the specific texture of that silence. It was different from the silence of the house she had left. That silence had been full of things unsaid, things unasked, the low hum of a life that was performing itself rather than living itself. This silence was clean. It was the silence of a space that belonged to her, filled only with what she had chosen to put in it. She got up, she made coffee oat milk 1 sugar, and she stood at the window of her Brooklyn Heights apartment and watched the first gray light of the new year come up over the rooftops, and she felt something she hadn't felt in so long she had almost forgotten it was possible. She felt like herself. Not the self that had been managing Daniel's moods and Daniel's schedule and Daniel's narrative for 8 years. Not the self that had spent 3 careful weeks building a legal case while smiling across a dinner table. The self underneath all of that, the Emily Walsh who had come to New York at 22 with a suitcase and ambitions she hadn't yet named, who had built a career from nothing, who had chosen Daniel once from a full life of other possible choices and could choose differently now. That self was still there. She had been there the whole time. She had just been very, very quiet. January was hard in the way that honest things are hard, not dramatically, not in the way that makes a good story, but in the slow, real way of getting up every morning and choosing to move forward when the weight of what had happened was still present, still sitting in the room with her. She didn't try to pretend it wasn't. She had cried in the shower the first week, real crying, the kind with sound, the kind that emptied something out. She had called Rachel on a Tuesday night and said, "I did the right thing, and I still feel like I'm grieving." And Rachel had said, "That's because you are. You're allowed to grieve the life you thought you had." And Emily had said, "I know. I just didn't expect it to feel like this even when I'm not sorry." Bosom. Rachel said, "Those 2 things can both be true." They were both true. Emily was not sorry. She also ached sometimes in the early mornings before the coffee was ready with the particular grief of someone who has lost not a person but a belief. The belief that she had been loved the way she was giving love. That grief was real, and she let herself feel it rather than rushing past it, because she was not the kind of woman who rushed past real things. But she also, and this was the part that surprised her, felt a momentum she hadn't felt in years. The apartment was hers to organize exactly as she wanted. Her evenings were hers to fill. She started running again. She had stopped somewhere around year 4 of the marriage when the habit had fallen away in the slow erosion of shared routines. She started at 20 minutes and built to 40, then an hour, moving through the Brooklyn streets in the early mornings with her headphones in and her mind doing the quiet work of sorting itself out. She went back to therapy. Her therapist's name was Dr. Anita Reeves, and she had a direct, compassionate manner that Emily appreciated precisely because it did not tip into sympathy. She didn't need sympathy. She needed someone to think clearly with. In their 3rd session, Dr. Reeves asked, "What do you want your life to look like in a year?" Emily thought about it seriously the way she thought about every real question. "I want to be leading something," she said, "something of my own. I've spent 12 years being excellent in support of other people's visions. I want to build something with my own name on it." Dr. Reeves said, "What's stopping you?" Emily said, "Nothing anymore." And she meant it. The consulting idea had been in the back of her mind for 3 years. A boutique communication strategy firm, the kind that worked with mid-sized companies navigating growth, helping them build messaging that was authentic rather than manufactured. Emily had the skills. She had the network. She had 12 years of client relationships and a reputation that had nothing to do with Daniel Carter and everything to do with her own consistent, excellent work. She had not pursued it while married because the timing had never been right, or the finances had felt uncertain, or Daniel had needed more of her attention during a particular quarter, or some version of not yet that she now recognized as not quite brave enough. The not yet had accumulated into years. She was done with not yet. She spent 2 evenings a week in January building a business plan. Methodical, detailed, financially grounded, Emily did not do things halfway. She ran the numbers 6 different ways. She identified her first target clients from her existing network. She drafted a positioning statement that she rewrote 11 times until it said precisely what she meant. She called her former colleague James Park, who ran a small design studio, and asked if he'd build her a brand identity. James said he'd been waiting for her to ask him something like this for years. "I always thought you were too good to be someone else's marketing director," he said. Emily laughed genuinely. "I was an excellent marketing director." "Yeah," James said, "and now you're going to be a better founder." In the middle of all of this, the running the therapy, the business plan, the daily work of rebuilding Emily's professional life did something she hadn't entirely anticipated. It accelerated. Her reputation, it turned out, had been building quietly for years while she had been focused on the work itself rather than on being seen doing it. In February, she was approached by a woman named Catherine Walsh, no relation, who was the incoming chief marketing officer at a mid-sized tech firm called Veritas Systems. Catherine had heard of Emily through 2 mutual contacts and wanted to meet for coffee. Emily said yes. They met on a Thursday morning, and within 20 minutes, Emily understood that this was not a casual networking conversation. Catherine was building a marketing organization from scratch. She needed a senior director with both strategic vision and operational experience, and she had done enough research to know that Emily was one of a small number of people in New York who had both. "I've heard your name 3 times in the last month from people I deeply respect," Catherine said. "That doesn't happen by accident." "What does the role look like?" Emily asked. Catherine told her. The scope was significant building and leading a team of 12 owning the full brand strategy for a company that was 6 months from a Series B raise with a direct line to the CEO and a seat at the leadership table. The compensation was substantially more than she had ever earned. Emily asked 3 precise questions about the company's growth trajectory, the CEO's leadership style, and the existing team's strengths and gaps. Catherine answered all 3 fully and without hesitation, which told Emily most of what she needed to know about what kind of leader Catherine was. She said, "I'll need 2 weeks to complete my due diligence and give you a real answer." Catherine smiled. "I was told you'd say something like that. Take 3. Emily took 2. She researched Veritas thoroughly. She spoke to 4 people who had worked with the CEO. She reviewed the company's market positioning and found 3 immediate strategic opportunities that the current leadership hadn't yet articulated publicly. She wrote a 2-page document laying out those opportunities and what she would do with them in the first 90 days, and she sent it to Catherine the morning she called to accept the offer. Catherine called back within the hour. "You sent this before you even officially joined." "I wanted you to know what you were getting," Emily said. "I know exactly what I'm getting," Catherine said. "When can you start?" Emily started on March 1st. The first week at Veritas was the kind of professional awakening that reminds you what you're capable of when you are fully, entirely yourself. She walked into a room of 12 people who didn't know her yet, and within an hour, she understood who they were, what they needed from her, and what the team was missing. She didn't perform confidence. She was simply clear about the strategy, clear about expectations, clear about the fact that she was there to build something real, and she intended to do exactly that. By the end of the first month, 3 members of her team had told her individually and unprompted that it was the first time in their careers they had felt like their manager actually saw them. She thought about that a lot. Being seen, how much it mattered, how rarely it happened in either direction. How rarely people looked carefully at the people right in front of them. She did not think about Daniel often. When she did, it was without the burning quality that grief sometimes has in early stages. It was more like touching a healed place, slightly tender, fundamentally closed. She had processed what she needed to process, and what remained was simply information. Information about what she had accepted for too long, what she had told herself was fine when it wasn't what she would not accept again. Rachel had dinner with her every week through January and February, and by March it became every other week because Emily's life had filled up in ways that felt good rather than distracting. She had things she wanted to do in the evenings. She had energy she wanted to spend on herself. That shift from someone whose life organized itself around managing loss to someone whose life was organizing itself around building happened gradually, and then all at once the way real changes happen. It was Rachel who first mentioned Michael Grant. In April at dinner, casually, in the way Rachel floated things she had been thinking about for longer than she let on. "There's someone I want you to meet," Rachel said. "And before you say anything, I'm not trying to fix you up. I just think you'd find him interesting." "Who is he?" Emily asked. "His name is Michael Grant. He's an architect. He designed that building on Water Street I showed you last year, the one you called the most honest building in New York." Emily looked up from her wine. "That's his... He designed it for a nonprofit that needed the space and couldn't afford to sacrifice any of it to aesthetics. He found a way to do both." Rachel paused. "He's been divorced for 4 years. No drama about it, which I find meaningful. He has a daughter, she's 9, she lives with her mom during the week. He's not looking for anything in particular, which is exactly why I thought of you." Emily was quiet for a moment. "I'm not ready for anything in particular either." "I know," Rachel said. "That's why it might be worth meeting him." They met for coffee the following Saturday. Not a date, Emily was firm about that framing in her own mind. 2 people meeting over coffee. She arrived first, which she always did, and when Michael walked in, she recognized him immediately from the photo Rachel had shown her, tall, easy in his movements with the kind of face that has been lived in. He sat down and said, "Rachel told me you called my Water Street building the most honest building in New York. I've been thinking about that phrase ever since. What did you mean by it?" She liked that immediately. Not small talk, not performance, a real question. "It doesn't apologize for what it is," she said. "Most buildings are trying to say something about themselves. That one is just trying to do its job well." He considered that for a moment. "I'll take that," he said. "It's the best review I've ever gotten." They talked for 2 hours. Not about their divorces, not about their pasts, not about the careful personal inventory people sometimes do on first meetings to establish credentials and wounds. They talked about buildings and cities and what makes a place feel like it has soul versus what makes it feel constructed. They talked about the difference between strategy and instinct, which turned out to be something both of them thought about constantly in their respective fields. They talked about his daughter Maya, who apparently had strong opinions about color theory at age 9, which Emily found delightful. When they left the coffee shop standing on the sidewalk in the April afternoon, Michael said, "I'd like to do this again." "So would I," Emily said. "No pressure on timing," he said. "I mean that genuinely. I'm not in a hurry." She looked at him. He said it the way he apparently did most things directly, without performance, without the specific undertone of a man who says he's not in a hurry while being very much in a hurry. He just meant it. "Neither am I," she said, and she meant it too. They saw each other again 3 weeks later, then again 2 weeks after that. It was slow in the way that things are slow when neither person is running towards something or away from something, when both people are simply present and curious, and willing to let a thing be what it actually is, rather than what they need it to be. He was not Daniel. She was not comparing them. That would have been unfair to Michael and useless to her. But she noticed quietly the things that were different. The way Michael listened when she talked about Veritas, not waiting for a pause to redirect, but actually listening, asking follow-up questions 3 minutes later that told her he had tracked what she said. The way he told her about a project that had gone wrong, a building he had designed that hadn't worked the way he intended, with honesty rather than spin. The way he talked about his daughter with warmth that was completely uncomplicated by self-consciousness. She told Rachel in May, "He's restful. I don't mean boring. I mean, I don't feel like I'm managing anything when I'm with him." Rachel said, "That's what it's supposed to feel like." Emily said, "I know. I'd just forgotten." In June, 6 months after the night at Aldea, the divorce was finalized. Patricia Morgan called her on a Tuesday afternoon to confirm. Emily was at her desk at Veritas in the middle of reviewing a campaign brief, and she stepped into the hallway to take the call. "It's done," Patricia said. "Final decree signed and filed this morning. Congratulations, Emily." "Thank you," Emily said, "for everything." "You did most of the work," Patricia said. "I just filed the paperwork." Emily went back into her office and closed the door and sat at her desk for a moment. She had expected to feel something seismic. She felt something quieter than that, a settling like the last piece of something fitting into place. The e-folder, which had traveled from her filing cabinet to her closet, to Rachel's guest room, to her new apartment, could now go into a permanent file labeled closed. She went back to the campaign brief. That evening, she told Michael over dinner. Not dramatically, she mentioned it the way you mention something that has been resolved, because that is what it was. He reached across the table and covered her hand with his for a moment. He didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "congratulations," or anything that required a particular response from her. He just held her hand for a moment, and then let go. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Finished," she said. "In the good sense." He nodded. Good sense is the only sense that matters. The consulting firm she had been building in the evenings for 6 months officially opened for business in July. She named it Walsh Strategy, her name the one she had been born with, the one she was returning to fully and formally as the divorce papers had been processed. The first 2 clients were referrals from her own network. The third came from a contact of Catherine's, which told Emily that her reputation at Veritas was already moving in circles she hadn't yet reached. She ran Walsh Strategy in the evenings and on weekends, not as a side project, but as a deliberate second engine, something she was building toward on her own timeline without urgency. She told Michael about it on an evening in July, when they were sitting on her apartment roof after dinner, the city spread out in every direction. "I've been thinking about it for 3 years," she said. "Every time I had the thought, I found a reason it wasn't the right moment." "What changed?" he asked. She considered the question honestly. "I ran out of reasons to wait," she said. "And then I realized the reasons were never really about timing. They were about permission. I was waiting for someone to tell me it was okay." She paused. "Nobody was going to tell me that. I had to tell myself." Michael looked at her. "Do you know what I noticed about you the first time we met?" he said. "What?" "You knew exactly what you thought," he said. "About the building, about strategy, about everything. You weren't trying the thoughts out to see if I agreed. You just knew." He paused. "I wondered what it would look like when that certainty started running your whole life, instead of just appearing in conversations." She looked at him in the July dark. "You're watching it," she said. "I know," he said. "It's something." By October, 10 months after she had walked out of Aldea's radius into a cold December night, Emily Carter's life was unrecognizable, not because she had replaced what she'd lost with equivalent pieces, but because she had built something that was genuinely hers in a way her previous life had not been. The apartment, the career, the firm, the slow and honest relationship that was becoming something she didn't need to rush because she trusted where it was going. These were not consolation prizes. They were the things she had always been capable of building. She just had not had the space to build them. She heard about Daniel in October. Not from him, his communications had stopped entirely by February, routed to Patricia, and then simply ceasing, but from a mutual acquaintance, Martin, who ran into her at a professional event and mentioned Daniel's name in passing, the way people do when they haven't tracked the full story. Martin said, "How is Daniel doing? Do you know I heard he changed roles?" Emily said, "I don't keep up with him." Martin caught himself. "Right, sorry, I know things changed. I just meant..." "It's fine," Emily said. And it was. She felt no spike of pain at the name, no surge of anger, no residual grief. She felt honestly something very close to nothing, which was not coldness, but completion. Daniel Carter was a chapter she had read fully closed, cleanly, and placed on a shelf. She did not need to take it back down. She thought briefly and without cruelty about where he probably was. The house sold, she knew that Patricia had managed the process, and Emily's share had gone into a fund she was building for Walsh Strategy's eventual full-time launch. The Henderson account gone. Whatever version of his life he was reassembling, she hoped it was honest. Not because she forgave him easily, she didn't, but because she had learned, in 10 months of building herself back up from clarity rather than from bitterness, that the weight of someone else's unfinished story was a weight she had no reason to carry. She had set it down. She was walking lighter. That was the whole of it. On a Saturday in November, Emily was running her usual route through Brooklyn, 45 minutes headphones in the city, doing its Saturday morning thing around her, when her phone buzzed with a calendar reminder she had set for herself 11 months ago, the morning after she left the house. It said, "Check in. How are you?" She stopped running. She stood on the sidewalk and read it, and laughed a real laugh, surprised out of her by her own past self, who had apparently been thoughtful enough to send a message forward in time to the person she was becoming. She typed a response into her notes app to no one, just for herself. "I'm good. I'm really good. The firm has 3 clients. Veritas is going better than I planned. Michael is coming for dinner tonight, and I'm not nervous, which means I trust it. Rachel is Rachel. I'm running again. I sleep well. I made the right call." She read it back. Then she added one more line. "The woman he called maintenance built something he could never have imagined, and she did it without looking back." She put her phone in her pocket and started running again, moving through the November morning with the particular ease of someone who knows where she is going, who has done the hard work of becoming exactly who she intended to be, who is not waiting for permission or timing or the right moment or any external signal whatsoever. Emily Carter was 41 years old, and she was only just beginning, and the life ahead of her was entirely, completely, permanently her own. The woman Daniel Carter betrayed did not break. She rebuilt, and what she built was better than anything he had ever deserved.